You ever wonder what happens when the justice system fails, and someone you love decides to take matters into their own hands? I was just a broken teenager, abused, abandoned, nearly killed until my grandfather, a quiet man with a fierce heart, made a decision that would change everything.
He didn't wait for justice, he became it.
I always knew I didn't fit in, not at home, not at school, not even in my own skin. I was the accidental child, born from a one-night stand that shattered a marriage and made me a living reminder of betrayal. My father, he pretended I didn't exist. His wife despised me, and their kids made sure I felt every ounce of that hatred. I wasn't the daughter, the sister, or even the step anything. I was the stain they couldn't scrub out. My mother wasn't any better. She drowned herself in drugs, disappearing for days at a time, coming back with shaky hands and bloodshot eyes, spewing apologies she wouldn't even remember the next morning. I learned early that love wasn't reliable, that the people meant to protect you could be the first ones to hurt you, or worse, ignore you completely. But somehow, amidst that chaos, there was light. My grandparents on my father's side opened their arms and never let go. It is strange to say that the parents of a man who wished I didn't exist turned out to be my salvation. My grandma smelled like vanilla and safety. She called me her little lioness, always reminding me I was stronger than the pain I carried. My grandpa was quieter, but his presence spoke volumes. When he took my hand, it was like the noise in my head finally stopped. They didn't treat me like an accident. They treated me like family. I spent every weekend at their house and most of my school holidays in my grandpa's office.
He owned a law firm, not one of those stiff, soulless places.
Because when you grow up being told you're worthless, when you're taught to accept scraps of love and silence your screams, you start to believe it. You start letting the wrong people in, people who see your cracks and decide to split you wide open. I didn't know it yet, but my past wasn't done punishing me. It was only setting the stage for something darker. Something that would test every bit of strength I didn't know I had. And just like that, Goat saw right through me. He didn't just notice my loneliness, he weaponized it. He listened, really listened, something no one had done before. He told me I was mature for my age. That I was special, that no one else could understand me the way he did. And at that time, I needed to believe that. So I did. He would bring me small gifts, books, bracelets, a beat-up sketch pad he claimed reminded him of me. He told me secrets, made me feel chosen, like we were sharing some sacred world no one else could enter. It felt like falling in love. But in reality, I was falling into a trap. It started slowly.
He'd make little comments about my grandparents, how they were old-fashioned and didn't really get me. Then he'd ask why I needed them so much.
"You're not a kid anymore," he'd say. "You've got me now." And I believed him. Before long, the sleepovers at my grandparents' stopped. I stopped answering their calls, too ashamed to admit how deeply I'd bought into the fantasy. The worst marks were inside the way I flinched when a phone rang, the panic I felt every time I heard keys turning in a door. I wasn't living, I was surviving, and barely at that. But here's the sickest part. I thought it was love. He'd abuse me, then apologize with tears and trembling hands. "I just love you so much it hurts," he'd whisper, and I believed him. I had nothing else to compare it to. He cut me off from everyone. I lost touch with friends. I even stopped going to school for a while. My grandparents kept trying to reach me, but Goat always found a way to intercept, snooping my phone, deleting messages, even impersonating me online. I was trapped and I didn't even know it. This went on for 2 years. 2 whole years where I disappeared from the world and no one really knew why. Every day was a cycle of fear, apology, and numbness. And somewhere along the way, I stopped recognizing myself. But then something shifted. I was shaking so bad I couldn't even hold a glass of water. He didn't ask questions, he just let me sleep. That's the night everything changed, but getting out wasn't the end. It was just another beginning. Goat didn't let go quietly. He stalked me. Showed up outside Noah's house, sent threats to my phone. Once, he mailed me a photo of the two of us, burned around the edges with the words, "You're still mine," scrawled in ink. I lived in constant fear, jumping at every sound, watching over my shoulder every time I left the house. I wanted to go to the police. I did. But my grandpa's firm had a reputation, and I was terrified of bringing shame to the only man who ever protected me. And deep down, I was still scared of Goat, What if they didn't believe me? What if they arrested him and let him go? I didn't think I'd survive a second round. So I stayed hidden, sleeping at Noah's, trying to rebuild some semblance of safety. But it was fragile. My PTSD was like a shadow always behind me, always growing. I couldn't be alone. Couldn't walk down the street without flinching. I drank. I partied. I did everything I could to forget, but forgetting doesn't heal you. It only buries the pain until it festers. Then my grandma died. I didn't even get to say goodbye. And just like that, the last piece of my childhood light vanished. I spiraled hard after that. Depression, nightmares. I was still breathing, but I didn't want to be. And Goat? He was still out there, watching, waiting. I didn't know it then, but so was someone else. Someone who had watched me suffer, who had seen enough. Someone who was about to change everything. Freedom didn't feel like flying, it felt like falling. The night I ran from Goat and into Noah's house should have been my happy ending. But instead, it was the beginning of a new nightmare, one painted in fear, soaked in dread, and stitched together with shaky breaths and sleepless nights. Noah, my friend turned lifeline, didn't push me for answers. He just gave me space, a blanket, and a locked door. But every time the house creaked, I jumped. Every time my phone buzzed, I broke into a cold sweat. My body was out of the cage, but my mind. It was still locked up with Goat. The stalking began almost immediately. He was everywhere and nowhere. Shadowy figures across the street. Random friend requests from fake accounts. Missed calls at 2 a.m., with no voice on the other end, just breathing. I'd wake up to my window slightly open when I knew I'd closed it. Once I found a cigarette still smoldering on the back porch. I didn't smoke. Neither did Noah. Goat was hunting me. And I was terrified. I wanted to go to the police. I thought about it every day. But what if they didn't believe me? Worse, what if they did, but couldn't do anything? A restraining order was just a piece of paper. Goat had already proven he didn't care about laws. He'd crossed the line when he laid hands on me. There was no line left to stop him. Then there was my grandfather. The man who gave me stability, who'd built a reputable law firm from the ground up. I didn't want to bring scandal to his doorstep, didn't want reporters sniffing around, digging into my trauma. I could already imagine the headlines. Prominent lawyer's granddaughter in controversial abuse case. No, I couldn't do that to him, so I stayed quiet. I became a ghost, living in someone else's home, too scared to walk outside alone. Noah tried his best, bought blackout curtains, changed the locks, even installed a security system. But nothing kept Goat out of my head. My PTSD was brutal. Every loud noise sent my heart into overdrive. Panic attacks struck like lightning, no warning, no mercy. I'd crumble in grocery stores, freeze on sidewalks, and sometimes collapse mid-sentence when a car backfired. I wasn't just afraid, I was broken. And then my grandma died. It came out of nowhere, a heart attack, they said. Peaceful. Quick. But nothing about it felt peaceful to me. She was the last person who made me feel like I mattered. Her death was the final thread snapping, the last bit of safety being pulled from under me. I didn't even go to the funeral. I couldn't. Goat was still out there. What if he showed up? What if he was watching, waiting for me to be vulnerable again? So instead I sat on Noah's couch, wrapped in one of her old cardigans she'd left at my grandpa's, sobbing like the world had ended. Because for me it had. That was the darkest period of my life. I started drinking just enough to numb the memories, then more when the nightmares wouldn't stop. Parties became my escape. Music too loud to think. Rooms too crowded to feel alone. Faces blurred, names forgotten. I kissed strangers just to prove I could. I laughed too loudly and cried in bathrooms. Anything to forget. Noah worried. He said I was slipping. He begged me to get help. But how do you ask for help when you don't even know who you are anymore? I felt like a puppet with the strings cut, collapsing in every direction. Still, he never gave up on me. He'd sit with me during panic attacks, even when I screamed at him to leave. He held me through nightmares, even when I woke up punching the air. And when I finally whispered, "I think I need therapy," he said, "I've already found someone." I was just waiting for you to say it. But healing takes time, and I didn't have enough of it. Because right before my 18th birthday, Goat came back. I was walking home from a party. The sky was gray, and the street was empty too, quiet. I didn't hear him at first, but I felt him. A shadow behind me, a chill up my spine. When I turned around, it was already too late. He attacked me like an animal, fists flying, rage pouring out of him. I screamed, but there was no one around. He punched until my vision blurred, until my body crumpled, until I couldn't fight back anymore. I remember the sound of my own ribs cracking. I remember choking on blood and the taste of asphalt, then darkness. Someone found me, maybe a passerby, maybe an angel. I don't know. They called an ambulance. I was rushed to the hospital, unconscious, barely breathing. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. I didn't feel lucky. When I woke up, I was in a sterile room under buzzing lights, every inch of me bruised and bandaged. The nurses told me I needed to call an adult. I tried my father first. Of course, he didn't answer. My mother wasn't even an option. So I called my grandfather. He arrived like a storm. I've never seen him like that. Not even at my grandma's funeral. His eyes were red, his hands shaking, his jaw clenched so tight I thought he might break his own teeth. He didn't speak, he just held my hand and stared at the machines beeping around me. That was the moment I realized this wasn't over. Not for him. Not for me. And not for Goat. The pain was everywhere. Not just physical, but deep, bone-shaking, soul-crushing pain. When I opened my eyes in that hospital room, I wasn't sure if I'd died or if this was what dying felt like. The lights were too bright. My chest felt like it had been caved in. Every breath scraped like glass through my lungs. But worse than the pain was the memory. Goat. He'd found me again. And this time, he didn't come to talk or threaten. He came to end me. It was the night of a party, one of the bigger ones. Loud music, red cups, hazy laughter, my usual escape. I'd left early, buzzed, but still steady. I needed air. The streets were empty, my heels echoing off the sidewalk. I had just started to text Noah when I felt it, that cold jolt down my spine. Instinct. Fear. Something behind me. I turned, and there he was, Goat. There was no smile this time. No fake charm, just rage. He didn't speak, he lunged. The first blow knocked the wind out of me. I fell hard, skin scraping on the pavement.
He screamed something, but I didn't hear it. My ears rang with terror. I tried to crawl, scream, fight back.
But he was faster, stronger. His fists landed like thunder, one after the other. I tasted blood, saw stars. I thought, this is it. This is how I die. Then nothing. When I woke up, everything hurt. My arms were bruised, my face swollen, ribs wrapped tight in bandages. I couldn't sit up. A nurse leaned over me, calm and practiced, explaining that I was lucky. That someone had found me in the early hours of the morning, barely conscious, bleeding out. That I was stable now. Then she asked the question I dreaded most. Do you have someone we can call? I wanted to disappear into that hospital bed. My father was useless, my mother a ghost. Noah had already been through enough. But the nurse waited, gentle and patient. So I whispered the only name that felt safe, my grandfather. He showed up within the hour. Not just walked charged in. I don't even know how he got past security, but suddenly he was at my side, gripping my hand like it was the only thing keeping him standing. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at me, eyes red, jaw clenched, face pale like he'd aged 10 years in one night. I'd never seen him cry. Not when my grandma passed. Not when we buried her. But now, sitting beside my battered hospital bed, he broke. I remember him pressing his forehead to my arm, whispering things I couldn't fully hear, apologies, promises, rage, and beneath it all something else. Something simmering, darker. The police came not long after. They asked questions about Goat, about what happened, about everything leading up to the attack. I tried to answer, but my voice cracked. I was scared. Scared of what telling the truth might bring, of retaliation, of headlines, of reopening the wounds I had worked so hard to bury. But my grandpa didn't hesitate.
He gave them names, dates, evidence. He spoke with fire in his voice, like every word burned its way out. He didn't just want Goat arrested.
He wanted justice. Real, full, no room for error justice. I stayed in that hospital for almost 2 months. 2 months of doctors poking, nurses checking vitals, nightmares dragging me back to that sidewalk over and over again. But I also had my grandpa. Every single day he was there bringing me my favorite snacks, adjusting my pillows, sitting silently when the nights got bad. He met Noah too. And like everything else he did, he approached it with quiet strength. They shook hands, talked, and over time my grandpa began to trust him the way I did. He even joked once, just once, that he'd have to give Noah the grandpa talk before any proposals happened. I laughed, even though it hurt. Near the end of my stay, something shifted. It was after a small family gathering my grandpa dragged me to an attempt to bring some normalcy back into my life. We ate, talked, smiled. I felt like I could breathe for the first time in a long while. And afterward, on the way home, we stopped for ice cream. It was so simple, so ordinary, so normal. But then, in the car, my grandpa parked in our old spot by the water, handed me my cone, and pulled me into the tightest hug I'd ever felt. He didn't just say much, just held me like the world was trying to pull me away from him, and he wasn't going to let it. "You're safe now," he whispered. "You'll always be safe. I promise." That was the last night I ever saw him free. Because the next morning he disappeared. No calls, no notes, nothing, until I got the news. My grandfather, my protector. My rock had found Goat, tracked him down with help from his private detectives, and he shot him 3 times in the stomach. Once in the chest. Goat died in the hospital later that same day, and my grandfather. He walked into the police station, handed them the weapon, and confessed. No lawyers, no excuses. Just a statement. "He hurt my granddaughter, I'm not sorry." The media went wild. Prominent lawyer commits vigilante justice. Grieving grandfather turns gunman. Was it revenge or justice? I didn't speak to reporters. I couldn't. I was still recovering physically, emotionally, mentally. And now I had to do it without the one man who had been fighting for me all along. They charged him with manslaughter. He pleaded guilty. No trial, no appeal. And within weeks of being sent to prison, he was gone. Not by violence, not by suicide, by illness. Complications from terminal lung cancer he hadn't told anyone about. He knew he was dying. And still, he chose to spend his last breath making sure I never had to look over my shoulder again. That's the kind of love you don't repay with words. That's the kind of love that leaves a mark deeper than scars. He gave me my life back. And now it was my turn to live it. After the chaos, after the blood and the headlines and the courtroom murmurs, there was quiet. A stillness I hadn't known in years. The kind that didn't scream danger or ache with fear, it just was. But the silence came at a cost. My grandfather was gone. Not just physically, not just in the way death takes someone, but in the way it pulls the air from your lungs when you try to speak their name. He had left the world with a bang. Literally, but what lingered was a whisper. A promise fulfilled, a hole no one could ever fill. Recovery was slow. The physical pain faded first. Bruises turned yellow, stitches dissolved, and my ribs stopped aching when I laughed. But the emotional wounds, they clung tighter. Nightmares still stalked me. Panic attacks didn't care that Goat was dead. My brain replayed everything like a broken record. The attack, the blood, the helplessness. But for the first time I wasn't alone in the fight. Therapy became routine. Twice a week, I sat in a warm room with a woman who didn't flinch when I cried, didn't judge the darkness I spilled. She helped me untangle the trauma like old string, slow, patient, gentle. I learned how to breathe again. How to stop seeing every shadow as a threat. How to feel things without needing to drown them in alcohol. And Noah, he stayed. More than stayed. He became my anchor. He came with me to every doctor's appointment, helped fill out legal paperwork, learned how to calm me down when the panic hit mid-grocery trip. He never once asked for more than I could give. Just loved me. Patiently and loudly until I started to believe I deserved it. 1 month after my grandfather passed, I got the call. It was his solicitor. He wanted me to come in, said there were things that needed to be discussed. I expected legal documents, maybe a cold handover of assets. What I didn't expect was the letter. It was handwritten, thick, folded twice. I held it with trembling fingers as the solicitor stepped out to give me privacy. My grandpa's handwriting was messy, familiar. The letter was long, filled with memories and love. He told me he knew his time was short, that the cancer had spread too far by the time he caught it, that the idea of dying and leaving me unprotected was unbearable. So he made a choice. I couldn't let that monster live knowing what he did to you, he wrote. I couldn't let you spend the rest of your life afraid. I'm an old man. I've lived. But you, sweetheart, you're just getting started. He left me everything. 95% of his savings, his house, his personal investments, and most importantly, his law firm. On paper, it would transfer to me at age 20. But until then, his secretary, now the CEO, would run the day-to-day. I cried through the whole thing, not because of the money, not even because of the gesture, but because it was the final proof that I had been loved. That someone had seen me, really seen me, and decided I was worth protecting even if it cost him everything. I visited the office a few weeks later. The same building where I used to play pretend behind the front desk. Everything looked the same but felt completely different. Staff members offered soft smiles, knowing glances. They didn't treat me like a victim. They treated me like I belonged. Like I was his granddaughter. And now, at 21, I still work there. I'm not running the place, not yet. But I'm learning. Sitting in on meetings, studying case files, asking questions. I even have my own office now, tucked in the back, with a photo of my grandparents on the desk and a bookshelf filled with old law books and new dreams. My PTSD isn't gone. My depression didn't vanish overnight, but every day I get a little stronger. Therapy helps. So does purpose. I got a tattoo last year, 2 lions guarding a cub etched across my back like armor. One for my grandma, one for my grandpa, and a little one in the middle for me. They protected me in life. Now I carry them into every fight I face. Noah and I got engaged recently. He proposed in the park where we used to sit and talk for hours when things were bad. It wasn't fancy. No flash mobs or hidden photographers. Just him, a ring, and a shaky yes through my happy tears. We're getting married next summer, and I know my grandparents would have approved. Especially my grandpa. I think he saw it coming all along. Now, when I look in the mirror, I don't see the broken girl Goat tried to bury. I see a survivor. A woman forged in fire, sharpened by pain, and rebuilt by love. And it's only the beginning. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but my grandfather served his with burning fury, aged wisdom, and the calm of a man who knew his days were numbered. Goat had stolen my safety, my peace, and nearly my life. And my grandfather, the quiet lion behind a courtroom bench, made sure Goat would never hurt me, or anyone again. Here's the part no one saw coming. While I was healing, sleeping off painkillers and fighting night terrors, my grandfather was doing what he did best, working behind the scenes. He didn't ask for permission, didn't give me a heads up. But somewhere between hospital visits and silent tears, he decided the justice system wasn't going to cut it. And he had the resources to make that decision matter. You see, his law firm wasn't just legal paperwork and court appearances. In the basement of his office building sat a small, under-the-radar private investigation unit. Most people didn't even know it existed. They handled missing persons, corporate fraud, and occasionally cases that the police wouldn't touch. My grandfather kept that department close, trusted them like family. So when he gave them Goat's name, a grainy photo, and the words "find him," they did. They traced Goat across cities. Goat had tried to vanish, switched names, used fake IDs, couch-surfed through back alleys and abandoned warehouses. But my grandfather's people were thorough, ruthless even. Within weeks, they had everything: addresses, routines, patterns. Goat wasn't hiding well, just hiding from the wrong people. Now, this wasn't some heat-of-the-moment, blind rage act. My grandfather planned it.
He waited until he knew Goat was isolated, far from prying eyes. He didn't want to make a scene. He didn't want to risk a trial. He wanted closure, permanence, a final, immovable act.
It was a gray morning when it happened. Goat was holed up in a rundown apartment above a forgotten bar on the outskirts of town. My grandfather drove himself, his favorite coat buttoned all the way to his throat, a manila folder on the passenger seat, and the pistol he'd kept since his army days locked in the glove box. What happened in that apartment is something I'll never fully know. The news reports were vague. Man shot multiple times in targeted incident. No struggle. No witnesses. Just 4 shots, 3 to the gut, 1 to the chest, and Goat bleeding out on the floor of a room that smelled like cheap whiskey and cigarette smoke. But I imagine it like this. My grandfather walks in, calm, controlled, Goat probably recognizes him immediately. Maybe he tries to run. Maybe he laughs, thinking this old man is bluffing. But my grandfather doesn't bluff, he pulls the gun. Maybe he says something, maybe not. Maybe he just thinks about me lying in a hospital bed, face purple and lungs barely working. Maybe he remembers the fear in my eyes, the sobs in the middle of the night when I thought Goat would find me again. And maybe that's all he needs to pull the trigger. 4 shots. That's it. He doesn't flee, doesn't hide, doesn't even hesitate. He walks out of that building, gets back into his car, and drives straight to the police station. He hands over the weapon, sits down, and says the words that still echo in my mind. He hurt my granddaughter. I'm not sorry. They arrested him on the spot. The headlines exploded. Prominent lawyer takes justice into his own hands. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. Everyone had an opinion. Was he a hero? A criminal? A grieving grandfather pushed too far, but he didn't care what they thought.
He didn't hire a defense attorney, refused all interviews.
He pled guilty to manslaughter and said he accepted whatever punishment they gave him. Not because he believed he did something wrong, but because, in his eyes, his mission was complete. By the time the trial was over, the cancer had already spread. Lung cancer, stage 4. Unchecked, aggressive, and terminal. He'd known for months. That's why he did it. That's why he acted with such finality. He was a dying man with nothing left to lose, except me. And he wasn't willing to lose that too. They sent him to prison, but he didn't last long. Complications from the cancer took him just weeks later. I never got to say goodbye, not really. I didn't get to see him behind bars. Didn't get to thank him for saving me in the most brutal, final way a man could. But then came the letter, and everything made sense. He knew he wouldn't survive, knew time was running out. So he made peace with his own end. The only way he could by ensuring mine wouldn't come at the hands of a monster. I couldn't live with myself if he walked free, he wrote. But I could die knowing you never look over your shoulder again. And I didn't. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. No dreams, no panic, just stillness. That kind of justice isn't clean. It doesn't come with neat court rulings or smiling prosecutors.
It's messy.
It's painful. And it is not something I can ever explain to someone who hasn't lived my life, but to me, it was love. Fierce, protective, final. And though I lost him forever, I got something back. I got my life. The world didn't stop when my grandfather died. It didn't even slow down. People still rushed to work. Traffic lights blinked. The news cycle spun on. But inside me, everything stood still. He was gone. And with him, the last piece of my foundation crumbled. The cancer had claimed him quietly, just weeks into his sentence. The official report said complications, as if that word could capture the devastation of losing the only man who ever made me feel safe. I didn't get to visit. I didn't get to say goodbye. No final hug, no whispered thank you. Just a phone call and a sterile voice on the other end confirming what I already feared. My grandfather died alone in a prison hospital bed, not as a hero, not as a respected attorney, but as an inmate. And yet to me, he died a legend. A week after his death, I got the second call from his solicitor. This one wasn't about paperwork or court formalities. It was something deeper, something final. When I walked into the office, once filled with his scent, his voice, his quiet strength, it felt hollow. But on the table was a folder with my name on it and a sealed letter. I sat down, took a breath, and opened it. Inside was his last message to me, not a goodbye but a guide. His handwriting shook a little more than usual, but every word was still deliberate, loving, proud. He wrote about the cancer, how he knew it was terminal before the trial. How he didn't tell me because he didn't want me to carry that burden on top of everything else. He explained his decision to find Goat, to confront him, to end what the system failed to. I couldn't leave this world knowing he was still in it, he wrote. You've already been through hell. I wanted you to have peace even if I had to trade mine for it. Tears streamed down my face as I read on. He left me everything. 95% of his savings, with the stipulation that I could do with it whatever I wanted. His home, the same one he shared with my grandmother, the only place I ever truly felt at home.
His cars, his investments.
his personal library where he had written hundreds of pages of notes and philosophies, and then the firm, the law firm that had been his life's work, his crown jewel. One would inherit it fully at 20, with the current CEO, his longtime secretary, running operations until I was ready to take over or sell it. It wasn't just money, it was a legacy. But more than that. It was trust that I could carry on what he started, that I could find my voice in the very world that once tried to silence me. He saw something in me I hadn't seen in myself: strength, resilience, purpose. I didn't know what to do with all that at first. It was overwhelming. I was barely 20, still in therapy, still learning how to breathe without fear. And now I owned a legal empire? It didn't feel real. It didn't feel fair. It felt like a dream I didn't dare dream. My father, of course, saw dollar signs. He showed up at the funeral. Not to grieve, but to probe. He hadn't spoken to me in years, hadn't lifted a finger while I was in the hospital. But now? He wanted clarity on the will. He questioned the division of assets, suggested that maybe my grandfather hadn't been thinking clearly when he wrote it. I cut him off. Legally, personally, emotionally, he was done. And when he tried to stir up trouble calling the solicitor, threatening to contest, I handed the entire thing to the firm's legal team. They shut him down in days. It was the first time I felt like I truly had power. Over the next year, I slowly stepped into my new life. I started working at the firm not in a high-powered position, but in a learner's role. I shadowed cases, attended meetings, learned the business from the inside out. I wasn't interested in being a figurehead. I wanted to earn my place. The staff welcomed me with cautious respect. They knew who I was, what I'd been through. But they didn't treat me like a victim. They treated me like I was my grandfather's granddaughter, because took part of my inheritance and put it into a college fund for the younger cousins and step-siblings who had treated me like trash growing up. Not for them, but for the kids they might one day raise. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about breaking the cycle, giving the next generation a shot my mother and father never gave me. And then I opened a safe house, a haven for people of all genders, ages, and backgrounds dealing with abuse. It started small, just a rented space, a few cots, and a couple of volunteers. But it grew, fast. Word spread. We got donations, we partnered with therapists, legal advisors, and shelters. People came, hurt, scared, lost, and we helped them stand again. It was the kind of place I wish I'd had. I also started designing plans for a bakery, my dream. A little shop where I could hire people from the safe house, give them purpose and a paycheck. A place that smelled like cinnamon and hope. I'm still working on it, still building up the courage. But it's close, closer than ever. And through it all, I carry my grandparents with me, every decision I make, every client I help, every survivor I speak to. They're there watching, guiding, loving. I miss them every single day. But their legacy lives in me, in this life I'm building, in the healing I'm doing, in the people I'm lifting up. My grandfather gave me more than justice. He gave me freedom. And now it's my turn to use it. Grief never really leaves you. It just changes shape. Some days it's a whisper in the back of your mind. Other days it's a roar in your chest. But slowly, through therapy, love, and quiet resolve, I learned to live with it. More than that, I learned to live through it. Because when someone gives up everything to protect you, you don't waste that gift. You carry it. You honor it. You build something worthy of the pain they bore for you. And that's what I set out to do. After the inheritance, after the funeral, after the letter that changed my life, I was standing on the edge of two worlds, my broken past behind me and a life of possibility ahead. But possibility doesn't mean certainty. It took months before I believed I deserved the life I now had. The law firm became my training ground. I started at the bottom, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I needed to earn my place. I shadowed the CEO, my grandfather's trusted secretary, and soaked in everything I could. Contracts, negotiations, case strategy, I was learning it all, and the team? They never treated me like a tragic backstory. They didn't pity me or speak in hushed tones when I walked into a room. They looked at me and saw the granddaughter of the man who built the empire they worked in. And in time, they saw me. not as his shadow, but as my own person. Outside of work, healing became my other job, therapy twice a week. PTSD treatment that included EMDR, breathwork, and endless journaling. I still have flashbacks. Still had days when I couldn't leave the house. But the difference now? I had tools. I had support. I had Noah. God, Noah, from day one, he never let me fall too far. He knew when to hold me and when to push me. He reminded me of who I was before Goat tried to erase me, and he stood beside me as I slowly rebuilt her. One day I asked him, "Why did you stay? Why didn't you run when things got hard?" He looked at me like it was the dumbest question in the world. "Because you never stopped fighting," he said. "So why would I?" We got engaged on a quiet morning in the same park where I had first told him about Goat. No cameras. No show, just him, a ring, and a future I never thought I'd get to have. We're getting married next summer. Sometimes I sit with that fact for a while. Let it sink in. I'm getting married. Not because I need someone to save me, but because I've saved myself, and now I get to share that strength with someone who never stopped believing in me. The safe house became my passion project. At first, it was just a dream, a thought I scribbled in my notebook during therapy. But dreams, when fueled by pain and purpose, become action. I used part of my inheritance to buy a small property on the edge of town, discreet, secure, and welcoming. I named it Haven. At Haven, we don't just offer beds, we offer beginnings. We have counselors on call, legal advisors, and connections to job training programs. Some people stay for a night, others for months. Some come back just to talk. And when they walk through our doors, they're not victims. They're survivors, just like me. I remember the first woman who came in with a black eye and her toddler in her arms. She couldn't stop shaking. Her voice was a whisper. But we gave her warmth, food, and time. And now, she's a full-time staff member. She runs our daycare program and teaches others how to reclaim their power. That's the real revenge. Not violence, not blood, but building something beautiful from the ashes they left behind. And then there's the bakery. I haven't opened it yet, but I'm close. The space is picked out. The business plan is drafted. I want to call it Cub and Crown, a tribute to the two lions on my back and the cub they protected. It'll be a place for comfort, for second chances, for the people society forgets. I plan to hire from Haven, give jobs to those who need a fresh start. Teach them not just how to bake, but how to rebuild, because bread doesn't just rise, it transforms. And so do we. Sometimes I still cry for what was taken, for what can't be returned. But now I cry without shame, because every tear reminds me I'm still here, still fighting, still rising. I wear my past like armor, not as a wound. Goat may have broken parts of me, but he didn't destroy me. And my grandfather? He left me more than money.
He left me courage, legacy, fire. The world tried to silence me, but now I speak, and I build, for myself, for others.
And for the memory of two lions, who taught a little cub how to roar. Summarize, from trauma and loss to empowerment and legacy. Sometimes the hardest revenge is healing and building something better. Strong CTA. If this story moved you, like and subscribe, because when we rise together, we rewrite our destiny.